Be talking about Llyod Harrel Jr. He's known as Crime Fighter. He is a friend of Doug Mulder's. He said on the stand there in Darlie's trial, he was the one that got Mulder to call Jimmy Patterson for the defense, which is really strange for the defense to call the lead investigator in a capital murder crime to the stand. And Mulder asked a few questions of him and blah, blah, blah. But then he got to this idea that Harrel came up with. He's supposed to be 20 years in crime scene investigation as an FBI agent. He thought that if Jimmy Patterson and Chris Frosch, the two detectives on the case there, put a bug 10 feet away, 10 to 15 feet away from the gravesite and recorded that was illegal. Llyod Harrel is not a very good judge of character because it's not illegal. Outside in public, I can't stress this enough. Outside in the public, you can't expect privacy. But I will give him this. The laws are more clear now than they were back then. But the whole idea was to get it in your head for the layman. Oh my God, the detectives in the case took the fifth. Never seen that before in my life. Which is true, except for Mark Furman, the OJ case. And he did it for the same reasons too. Because if we're accused of a crime, if no matter you're in an open court or on the street, we do not have to testify against ourselves. But he thought, this is a guy that thinks Darren did it too. He makes it perfectly clear that Darren did it. But they put him on the stand, and I don't believe he was allowed to say that because Mulder didn't want him to say that. But I'm going to go through his testimony, and I'm going to go through some of the writings about him. He died in January 15th of 2024, bless the man's heart. So, talking about the experience that sat on that stand for Darlie Routier. I want you to keep one thing in mind. You don't need a warrant to record someone in a public setting. You don't. It doesn't have to go through the court or nothing. No one has the right to expect privacy in a public setting. It's always been that way. Just think while you watch this, if any of us know John Gotti and the John Gotti story and what got John Gotti busted was that he was recorded by the FBI talking about the crimes that he committed in an apartment above the Ravenite Club there on Mulberry Street. I think it's 216 Mulberry. Let me take a look. Okay, this is the site of the Ravenite Club, which was where John Gotti would meet with his wise guys. And they were very open about it. You can see, look at Mob Facts on YouTube. And you can see clips of John Gotti walking up and down the street here with Sammy the Bull. It's 241 Mulberry Street. It's got a new facade outside of it now. This didn't used to be here. They've even took up the floor. It was a shoe store and a dress shop for a long time. But now it's got a new facade. And what the FBI did is they bugged this place. But Gotti would always turn his music up, just like you seen in The Sopranos when Tony went down in the basement to talk to everybody. He'd turn the music on, and they couldn't hear it, or he'd go out in the hallway. Well, what they did was, what John Gotti did after a while, was up in his second floor apartment, was a widow to an old mob guy, and he paid her so that every time he would go upstairs, she would make herself scarce, and he could talk up there without being bugged. Because the FBI had no idea he was doing that until there was a snitch that told him he was doing that. And they bugged it. They wiretapped it with permission because there was a warrant to do so. Right? But this is private property. He owned this. They had to get a warrant from a federal judge saying, hey, we might hear some things about crime in here. And the judge signed it. But out on the street, the FBI had an apartment right here and up here. And when the guys would go outside to do their walk and talks, they're walking up and down the street here talking. Gravano with the umbrella over top of Gotti. They were permitted to have lip readers read their lips. And they were getting information that way for a while. But then the guys would start covering up their mouths. You see them do that on The Sopranos too. They start covering up their mouths because the guys got hip to that. But once they got a warrant to wiretap this apartment, Gotti didn't know it. And that's when you hear him talk about the murders he committed, talk about the businesses he was messing with. You tell him I'll sever his motherfucking head off. That's what got Gotti busted. That he had already won 3 times in court. The Teflon Don, none of the charges would stick. But with these tapes, they stuck. Now, one of the ways that the tape got him busted, the recording, is that Sammy the Bull Gravano was a very tough, very business-minded, very loyal, wise guy as Gotti's underboss. And he started to come up really, really well. If anybody knows the mob, just look at the Nicky Scarfo story and how he took out some people he was jealous of that were in the mob. But Gotti felt like Sammy was getting too much credibility and was making him look bad as a boss. Because Sammy was very loyal to him, but he was earning more than him. And people kind of liked Sammy more than they did Gotti, because Gotti was really flashy. And he was really out there, really public. So the FBI recorded up in that second story apartment that I was telling you about. They had that bugged with a warrant because they thought that they were going to hear some incriminating stuff about the mob. And Gotti had planned on taking Sammy Gravano out. He put a hit out on him because he was getting too big. Same thing Nicky Scarfo did to his underboss. Look at Nicky Scarfo. So the police, the FBI, they hooked Gravano up on some other dumb charge. Brought him in. The mob guys aren't worried about getting brought in. Brought him in on some other dumb charge while the FBI slips in there. The whole idea was for the feds to get him down there where he would talk to them. And the feds played the tape for Sammy of Gotti talking about having him hit. And he had been so loyal to him over the years. I mean, he'd even hold an umbrella over the man's head when it rained. So that's why Sammy turned. That's why Sammy turned, was because of legal tapes that were made by the police. Let's get back to the Darlie case. Another thing that police really can't do, now you can see right here, I'm just going to show you in a situation where they have to have a warrant. Unless the police have a warrant or you give consent to allow the police to look through your phone, they do not have a right to look through the contents of your phone even when you're in custody. But they get a warrant to do that on your phone because your phone is private. It's not public. But let's say they're using Facebook and some of these other social media sites to gain a lot of convictions on people because your social media is not private. And if it was privatized, right? Let's say you have a Facebook channel, but you've got everything privatized. Facebook holds all of your data for 18 months, and the police can actually subpoena it, and they have done that. Today, now that laws are more clear, they were clear back then. You just had to dig into it about recording people in public. Today, back in 96, police did not wear body cams, but they could have. You would see dash cams, right? Give me an example. You would see dash cams back then. They were just starting to become popular back then. And they would use what they filmed on the dash cam to prove you committed the traffic violation or whatever it was. Right? So it was perfectly legal for Patterson and them to do what they did. Just think about this. The paparazzi follows celebrities around. They run in front of their faces with cameras, and it pisses them off most of the time. Sean Penn used to punch people for doing that to him. Bruce Willis is another one who gets pissed off at it. He used to. He's got a really bad way to go. We're going to lose Bruce Willis. But I just wanted to make it understood about how Jimmy Patterson and Chris Frosch committed no crime, but Harrel was too dense to understand that. He was dense. So they put him on the stand, and that's where I'm going to go now with it. Okay, first I'm going to go through the defense's direct examination of Harrel as he first said on the stand. It's done by Mr. Preston Douglas, which is one of the many attorneys that Darlie had over the years. And it starts with, all right, Mr. Harrel, after he explains his FBI credentials, which is above, and now he's a higher end. He was retired. He's a higher end that does court cases, just like James Cron did. Danelle. But that's okay when they do it for the defense. All right, Mr. Harrel, let me ask you, in the course of your duties with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, did you have training in both into the federal code, which embodies all criminal laws of the United States, and have you also had the opportunity to review the state penal code for the state of Texas? In some instances, yes, sir. Were you aware that in the course of your investigation that a secret recording was made at the graveside of Devin and Damon Routier? Yes, sir, I was. And are you aware that there was a microphone placed in a bush which is located approximately 10 to 15 feet from the graveside? Yes, sir. Based on your experience and training as a special agent in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, do you have an opinion whether or not that was a lawful act? I believe it's an unlawful act against the federal law. I believe it's also against the state law. Well, he was wrong. And they had dash cams back then, so I don't know what made him think that. Have you reviewed the federal and state law that prohibit unlawful interception communications? Yes, sir, I have. To your knowledge, in court, has the state of Texas produced any lawful warrant You don't have to have a warrant to record in public. You have to have a warrant to record in private. The Rowlett Police Department had permission from Rest Haven, who owned the property, to record. That's why it was never illegal. Or any lawful authorization by a magistrate or a judge with the lawful authority enabling the state of Texas to produce or to enable the state of Texas to place that bug in a bush lawfully. And he's right. We have seen no warrant or document issued by any magistrate, judge, or court which authorizes the interception for surreptitious purposes. Surreptitious purposes. And it's your understanding that the microphone was planted and recorded private communications that a prayer service that was at a prayer service on June 14th of 1996. Yes, sir. Right now, I wanted to show about the surveillance at the graveside. That's what I wanted to show. That it was perfectly legal, and this idiot for the defense brought it up to Doug Molnar, and Doug Molnar, his show, that was a big part of the trial, was Jimmy Patterson and Chris Frost taking the fifth. They wanted to present that for the jury, and they wanted to present that to the public. And to this day, they're still saying, the two lead detectives took the fifth? If the judge would have snapped at Greg Davis and said, hey, you committed this crime right now. I want you to talk about it. Greg Davis could say, no, I take the fifth. I'm not talking about that. And again, they take it out of context because they were only taking the fifth on that subject. Douglas Motor could have questioned them on anything else, but he didn't. He just wanted to be eccentric and sensationalize the trial to make it look like Darlie must be innocent because these two cops took the fifth.